Okay, so when we start, or first of all, in this presentation, I will start to talk about what influences your success, and timing is something very important in terms of retirement planning, and then also the relationship between risk and return. I will discuss that shortly. And then the next section of the presentation will focus on planning, how we do the calculations and how do we determine for you how much you should be saving and whether or not you will meet your retirement goals. And then in the last, in the last section, I will talk about retirement or savings options, the different vehicles that you can use to save for retirement. Okay, so when you look at what influences your success in terms of retirement planning, the first important thing is how long do you have to save for? So you control that to some degree because you don't have control over what happened in the past. So maybe you find out now for the first time how much you should be saving, and maybe you are already 35 or 40 years old, so you don't have control over the fact that you have not been saving enough until now, but you do have control over what you do today and tomorrow. So you do control how long you have to save because you decide whether or not you're going to start today. And then the risk you control, and I'll talk about that a little bit later more, about investment risk. So how much risk you are taking, that you always have control over. Then inflation is something that we don't have control over. And the rate of return is something that we don't have control over. And like we always say, it's very important to focus on the things that you do control, that you do have control over. People often get scared, and especially if they see that their retirement planning isn't going according to plan, or it's not on track, they maybe started to save too late, and then it's very easy to become disheartened and also to become anxious about it, and that's when they focus on things that they can't control. So there's no use in focusing on inflation or rate of return, politics, etc., everything that has an influence. We can't do anything about that, so we focus on what we can control, and we do our best to control that as best we can. Then, of course, another very important thing is the amount that you are saving. How much are you saving? You are always in control of that. And sometimes people say, well, I can't control that because I can't afford to save more. So there's a very important distinction to make here. You don't have control over your salary. You don't decide how much you earn. But you do decide how much you spend. And then people would say, but I need food, I need to pay this, I need to pay that. So I don't really have control over my spending. And I can understand why you feel like that, but there's a difference between your needs and your spending. So your needs is something you can't control. You cannot decide that you don't need to eat. You do need to eat, and that's a need that will always be there. You can't turn it off. But how much you spend on fulfilling that need, or how you go about to fulfill that need, that is something that you do have control over. So again, in that context, also to always focus on what you can control. And usually people see when they start to implement this approach, they see that actually I do have more control than I thought I had. I'm just going to pause my screen share because I just want to see, I'm afraid there may be people in the waiting room that I'm not seeing. So let me just check that. Okay, no, it doesn't look like anybody's waiting. Okay, I'm going to continue with to share my slides with you. I hope I will be able to see them when they come in. Sorry, that's not. There you go. Okay. So the time you have to save and the amount of savings, that is in the end the most important thing, and that's something that you can control. And also the time that you are saving will influence how much savings you have, of course, and also risk will again, the risk that you take in your investment will have an impact on the rate of return that you will have, and of course inflation as well. But the important thing to see here is that you have control over the time to save and the risk, and that impacts both the return of savings and your amount of savings. Inflation also has an impact, but we don't have control over that. So we have a lot of control. So if we look at this diagram, you'll see that today is, you know, the amount of time that you have to save from today until retirement is a specific number of years, and then from retirement until death. So of course we don't know when we are going to die, but we work on statistics and we know what life expectancy is, and we would rather have you have money left over one day when you pass away than that you have a shortfall in the last couple of years of your life. So we'd rather plan for too long than too short. So now, if you start working at 25 and you aim to retire at 55, you will have 30 years to save. And if, let's say, your life expectancy is around 85, then that means you will have 30 years to accumulate enough wealth to last you for 30 years. And that's not really a realistic goal to have. So, because then what portion? You would have to save a very big portion of your income. So if we change that and say, okay, instead of retiring at 55, you're going to retire at 60, then it already changes a lot. That 5 years makes a big difference, because now you have 35 years to accumulate enough wealth to last you for 25 years. So that's already a more realistic picture. And this is what most people, I think, do today, or at least what I recommend my clients is aim for retirement or plan for retirement at 65, because 65 is really still a young age where you can still work comfortably, and especially with medical science or developing the way it is. I think at 65, most people would still be healthy enough and young enough to continue, or at least to work until 65. So if you have this scenario, then you have 40 years to accumulate enough to last you for 20 years. And that's a much more realistic picture and an attainable goal. So this table shows us that at 25, if you start saving for retirement at 25, then you'll need to save 7% of your income, and that is to get to an income of 75% of your salary after retirement, which is the general rule of thumb, because some expenses won't be there anymore. You won't have to save for retirement anymore. That's possibly one of your biggest expenses, and then also you will most likely not have children to take care of anymore, or who you're financially responsible for. So if we defer starting to save for retirement with 5 years, only 5 years, so then instead of having to save 7%, you'll have to save 8% of your salary, which doesn't sound like a big difference. But if you look at the red block there, it will tell you that if you started saving 5 years later, then your loss would be, this is based on, this is just for illustration, if you invest 100 Rand per month at a 12% annual return. Let me just admit somebody, sorry. Now, the admit button has disappeared. Sorry, I just want to see if I can admit another person. I don't know, they disappeared now. Okay, maybe they'll try to join again. Okay. So if you delay with 5 years based on this, the information in this illustration, then you would have lost 533,000 Rand because you started saving 5 years later, and you would have saved up 643,000 Rand. So you could almost have double if you just started saving 5 years earlier. So you can see the person who started at age 25 will have at retirement age 1.1 million, and the person who started at 30 years will only have 643,000. So the lesson here is, it really is extremely important to start saving as much and as soon as you can. If we, just for illustration purposes, look at a person who starts at 40, he will have saved only 187,000, and he would have lost 988,000. And then by that time, he would need to invest 14% of his income in order to be able to retire at 65 with 75% of his income. Okay. Then the other very important thing to understand is, people often say that you have to time the market. I mean, all of us saw that with COVID, the stock market crashed. And so it's very easy to look back and see and say to yourself, if only I had invested then, because look at how much stock prices went up after, or in the recovery phase. But it's always easy to look back and think, if only I did this or that, I would have doubled my money. But the thing that you really need to do is have time in the market. We always say you don't time the market, you need time in the market. If you missed the top 50 days on the JSE in the past 20 years, and if you invested 100,000 Rand, then you would have missed 155,000. And if you missed the top 5 days, you would have missed 1 million Rand. You would have lost 1 million Rand. So that just shows you that it's about how much time you spend in the market. It's not about timing the market. And now the relationship between risk and return. So with investments, there's always risk. There's always some degree of risk. And the bigger the risk is that you are taking, the bigger the expected return will be. But it doesn't mean that the return will necessarily be bigger, because that's why it is a risk. If we knew that the return will definitely be bigger, then there won't be any risk. And important here is to understand that if somebody promises you unrealistic returns, then you must know that the risk is extremely high. We don't get higher than normal returns without taking more risk. So you will hear of people who made a lot of money investing in Bitcoin, for example. And again, yes, some of them got lucky, but you may just as easily have lost all your money by investing in Bitcoin. That's just an example. There are many investment vehicles like this out there, where you are being promised a very, very high return. And then you must just always think, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And my recommendation would be to at least consult somebody who knows a bit more than you do about these things. And also remember that Bitcoin is not legislated in South Africa at the moment. And so that means that it is a very big risk, because there aren't any regulations in terms of financial advice for that. Okay. I think I'm going to skip this because I think we're running a little bit over time. This just shows you must know your risk profile. So people's personalities differ. Some people like taking risk and some people like avoiding risk. And if we invest money for clients, we give them a questionnaire to determine what their personal risk profile is. But then we also take into account how long the time frame would be for your investment, and your financial circumstances, your personal circumstances, etc., to determine what your profile for your investment should be. But your personality definitely plays a role. So the more aggressive you are in how you invest money, the bigger your chances, or the higher return you could expect from that investment. And there isn't anything such as this is the best way to invest. It depends on the situation. And this is also very important. Every person's circumstances are unique, and it depends also what you are saving for. When you are saving for retirement and you are still quite young, then you should be investing a little bit more aggressively. Yes, do you have a question? I don't know if you can. Okay, I'm seeing somebody's coming into the room. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, like, I've noticed that there are different types of retirement plans. Can you maybe explain some of them? Because, for example, other than the retirement plan that is offered by my work, I don't have a personal one yet because they're so different and the information on some of them is really confusing. So can you maybe help me with like explaining some of them and like which one is the better option?
Sure, yes, I'll definitely do that. Later in the presentation, I'll give more information, and then we can also maybe chat afterwards, and I'll give you more specific details.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm just going to share my screen again. Okay, so let's see. So if you are a conservative investor, then you can realistically expect a return of inflation plus 1 to 2%, and then it goes up until you reach aggressive investor, where you can expect inflation plus 6 or 7%. So like I said, for a young person whose term is longer than 5 years, but definitely at least 5 years or longer, somebody 10 years from retirement, we would definitely recommend investing in a moderately aggressive portfolio. And then you can expect a return of inflation plus 5 to 6%. Okay, so this slide just shows us. Sorry, can everybody just? Oh, don't worry, I've muted them. Okay. This slide just explains or shows us what the effect of inflation is. So inflation really means that the purchasing power of your money declines as time goes by. So if you look at this, you can see that you could buy a Wimpy Sunday special for 30 cents in round about 1972, which of course today we know that with 30 cents we can't do anything. So that is why that's also something that is very important in retirement planning, is to take into account the effect of inflation. So the next section that I will be covering today is retirement planning, how we do your calculations, and what we need to know when we calculate for you how much you should be saving. So the first very important thing is, especially for I think many of our guests are employees at CUT. So your pensionable salary is the amount that is used to calculate your pension contribution. And this is something that most people usually don't know. Your pensionable salary is usually quite a bit less than your total cost to company. So you look at your total package, you look at your cost to company, and let's say for argument's sake, that's 300,000. Your pensionable salary may just be only 80% of that, and that's 240,000. And sometimes, like I said before, the recommendation is to aim for 70 to 75% of your income for retirement planning. So those letters that you receive from your pension fund, where they say that your retirement planning is on track or it's not on track, that calculates 70 or 75% of your pensionable salary. So for this person who earns total cost to company 300,000, the pensionable salary and then 70% of their pensionable salary would only be 168,000. So if that letter tells you that, yes, you are on track for retirement, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are really on track for retirement, because you need somebody to do the calculations for you so that you know what amount are they talking about when they say that. So when we do retirement planning, first of all, we look at how long will we need to provide for. So like I said, we look at life expectancy statistically. What is your life expectancy? And like we always say, if you are looking at this webinar, then you are definitely above the average, and your life expectancy is definitely not what the average is. So for women, usually we plan for 90 years, and for men, 88, 87 years. And then we need to know how much will you need in capital when you retire. And then, of course, how long do we have to save for? So from today until your retirement date, that is how long we have to save for. And then how much are you saving at the moment? And we also take into account what is your current pension fund value. And then we take into account all your contributions, whether it's pension money, your employer's pension contribution, as well as any retirement annuities that you may have. And we do a calculation to see how much capital you will have with that. What will your savings be by the time that you retire? And then how much income will you be able to draw from that for whatever your life expectancy is, 20 or 30 or 40 years, and taking into account the effect of inflation. So this is just to show you that the average life expectancy is currently just below 65, but like I said, you are not the average, and your life expectancy will definitely be something like, for a male, 86 years, and for a female, 92 years. That's at 65 when you retire. So when you think about retirement planning, you must think about what are your life goals, because always remember that retirement is not just about it's not just about finances. It's about what's important to you in your life and what do you want to accomplish. And so that's one of the things that you need to take into account. Do you want to go on an overseas trip after retirement? Do you maybe want to buy a new car at retirement? Those are all things that you need to take into account. And then the next thing, of course, is your post-retirement budget, which is something that you can already look at. You can compare based on your current budget, which of your expenses will not be there anymore. Like I said before, you won't need to save for retirement anymore, and you will most likely, or many people don't have children who are financially dependent upon them anymore. On the other hand, many people do have children who are financially dependent upon them at that stage, which of course is something that you need to take into account. And the closer you become, the closer you get to your retirement age, the more accurate those calculations become. But I must stress that those calculations is something that we can actually do very accurately. To determine how much risk cover a person needs, that's something that's a little bit more complicated, and we can't say with as much surety how much you will need in a risk if a risk event takes place. But for retirement, we can actually do the calculations very accurately. So now this is to answer your question, Poppy. So the third part of what I want to discuss today is about how you will be saving for retirement, what vehicles you can use to save for retirement. So there are basically three. There are more than three options, but I'm going to talk about these three. So the first one is unit trusts, which is discretionary money. And then there's pension fund and retirement annuity. So a unit trust is where people put their money together in a pool to buy shares in companies, which is a very cost-effective way to do it, because if you had to invest your own money directly in shares, you will have a few problems. First of all, there are broker fees that can be quite expensive. And then also you need a lot of knowledge, and you need to put a lot of time in to doing that. So for most people, that's not practically possible. And that is why unit trusts is a very good way to invest money. You can also make a withdrawal at any time without penalty. And you can invest in different funds with different risk profiles, from conservative to aggressive. However, that is one way that you can save for retirement. But with a pension fund and with your retirement annuity, you have a lot of benefits. And the biggest benefit is the tax deductions that you get. So I have to say, I'm not sure if this changed. It could have changed. This is this is last year's amounts, but you can deduct up to 27.5% of your salary that you are contributing towards a retirement annuity and or pension fund. So your pension fund and retirement contributions will be calculated together. And then there is an annual limit of 350,000 rand. So that's a very, very big benefit. And then on top of that, the investment returns that you get in a pension fund and in your retirement annuity, there's also no tax on that. So that tax benefit, if you take into account everything, a retirement annuity and a pension fund really is the best way to save for retirement because of this tax benefit. So this is just a small example to show you. If you earn 300,000 rand per year and you contribute 20%, which is 60,000 rand per year, your annual tax saving will be 15,600 rand. So that really makes it worthwhile. And this is something that we can help you with. We do retirement planning. So we, like I said before, we take into account your current pension fund, your current savings in a retirement annuity or whatever vehicle you may already have, what contributions you are making and for how long you will be making those contributions. And then we can tell you whether or not you will be able to reach your retirement goals. And if not, what amount you should be saving extra. So this is just a summary to summarize the advantages and disadvantages of retirement annuities. So the advantages of a retirement annuity includes that your contributions are tax deductible, like I just explained, and then the plan is protected against creditors. So if you have debt, the money in your retirement annuity will be safe. And the returns on the investment is not taxable before retirement, and you can withdraw up to 500,000 at retirement at 0% tax. So that's another big tax benefit. And then the disadvantages are you won't have access to the money before 55, sorry, which in my opinion really is it can be a disadvantage, but it's also an advantage because that prevents you from using the money before retirement. And then at 55, you are allowed to make a withdrawal of up to 1/3 of your retirement monies, but then you will be taxed. Any amount above 500,000 will be taxed. And the rest of it, you must invest in an investment that will give you a monthly pension. So that money is regulated. You can't do whatever you want with it. And then the other disadvantage is that the pension money will be taxable after retirement. So, okay, Poppy, I'm going to answer your question in a little bit more detail. So with a retirement annuity, things that you need to consider are what the cost of the investment is going to be, because, and it will be presented to you in terms of an effective annual cost. So whenever you make any investment, you must always know what is the effective annual cost. So that's the first important thing. It doesn't, if the cost is too high, then your returns won't be necessarily enough. It depends. But you must make sure that the cost isn't too high. And then another thing that you can take into account, some companies have bonuses. Sanlam has, for example, with the Cumulus Echo retirement annuity, you get the wealth bonus, which is an added amount to every contribution that you make. And for a young person, that really makes a very big difference in your retirement planning. So that's a very, very good feature. And then you also need to take into account what would happen if you ended the plan earlier, which is something that sometimes could happen if for some reason you can't afford to keep making the contributions. Then in some cases you may be penalized. So those are things that you need to take into account. But Poppy, if you want to stay on, I can quickly share with you more information about this if you would like to, or otherwise we can make an appointment and then we can talk about it. So you can just let me know in the question and answer in the chat box if you would like to do that. So I have a few questions for you which I wanted to. Okay, great. I'll send you or I'll give you a call and then we can set up an appointment. I just want to run a few polls that I actually meant to do this while I was presenting, but because I don't have a co-host, that didn't work very well. So let's go. No, it looks like, okay, no, I think we're going to, I'm going to have to skip the polls, or maybe let me see. Sorry, just give me a second. I just want to see if I can get this. Okay, here we go. Okay, so one person has answered. Two people have answered. So I'm just waiting for the third person to give their answer. Okay, let's go on to the next one. And now you should be able to see the results. So that's quite good, between 26 and 35. And now let's take a look at another question. Okay, good. That's very good. I'm going to show you the results. So that's very good. And let me just find the next one. Okay, this is the last one. Okay, thank you. So if you would like to make an appointment, you can stay on and we can decide upon a date and time. And for everybody else, thank you for joining us. Our next session will again be on the third Thursday of April. Please remember to register. And you can also see the list of presentations that we have in store for you on the website, Genwell, www.genwell.co.za. Thanks, everybody.